Welcome to Cove, Wellbeing and the My Trauma, Your Trauma series with me, Owen Morgan. I want to share my trauma journey and that of others. We will also look at the world of trauma healing, support and research, including guests who specialise in helping those overcome their trauma. My Trauma, Your Trauma is here to explore human experience. Welcome to Trauma Chat, where we invite on a guest to talk all things trauma. Please watch and listen with care. Some of this content may be triggering or may make you feel uncomfortable, so do press that stop button and take a break. Always put yourself first. I'm a mental health advocate sharing my lived experience. I'm also a massage therapist, a wellness audiobook addict, and a stepdad to my amazing 4-year-old. I've interviewed hundreds of wellness experts and people with stories of overcoming their wellness struggles. I myself have suffered with childhood abuse from childminders, severe school bullying, a deep depression in my 20s, and blackout anxiety. Plus, I had a life-threatening illness in my early 30s. So I've been around the block a few times. I want to give a voice to those who can inspire others to improve wellness. Now, I am so unbelievably excited today because I'm here with Malcolm Stern. Malcolm is a psychotherapist and author. He has worked as a group and individual psychotherapist for more than 30 years. He is a co-director and co-founder of Alternatives at St. James's Church in London and runs groups internationally. His approach involves finding where the heart is and helping individuals access their truth. His London 1-year group is the centrepiece of his work and has been successfully operating since 1990. Malcolm's new book, Slay Your Dragons with Compassion, due to be published on September the 8th, 2020 by Watkins, describes 10 practices for thriving in an unstable world, all distilled from his 30 years of intense group work. The book is filled with practical exercises which are combined with real and compelling stories from the therapy room. Malcolm will be presenting a book launch at Alternatives on Monday, the 19th of October. It's probably the longest intro I've done in a long time. How are we today, Malcolm?
Great, lovely to see you, Owen, and happy to be sharing in this sort of medium.
Yeah, no, thank you for joining me. And I know our good friend Kenny put us together. And as soon as I saw what was happening with your book, I got very excited. I'm a big advocate for compassion. I've been really looking into it recently. So when this opportunity came along, I really want to sit down with you. And I presume everything in my intro is correct. Is all those dates correct for the book release?
No, the book is released actually on the 29th of September.
Okay, well, there you go. The 29th of September. I will be putting links in.
But you can pre-order on Amazon.
Ah, right. Okay, that's great stuff. Well, I'll put a link in the description of this video for anybody that's listening right now who wants to pre-order. If it comes out, this episode will probably come out before it releases. So go and pre-order, guys, if you're listening, and check out the blurbs and such likes. It's going to be awesome. So, Malcolm, how has this crazy 2020 been for you so far?
It's been pretty crazy, but actually, I think what's quite interesting is I feel like the reset button has been hit for me. I got the virus in March, and I wasn't seriously having problems, but I had two weeks of night sweats, lost my appetite, lost a stone in weight at the time, put half of it back on again, and lost sense of smell, and was generally feeling unwell. And it took me probably a couple of months for the tiredness to pass on as well. But during that time, what I've realized is that my interests are changing. I had been very, very focused on my work and working every hour that God sends. So I was seeing clients all the time, running groups all over the world, which is great. It's really exciting, writing my book. And I felt like I was really flying high. But what I've realized is that I don't want to fly that high anymore. So what it's done for me is it's reset me. And I've determined now to move out of London. I have a flat in Totnes, which I'm going to go back to. And I'm going to be more in nature and just do the things work-wise that really ring my bell.
Which is really lovely because with your wealth of experience, like you said, you can apply this wisdom in other directions, which are less intense and focus on your writing and maybe less groups or whatever it looks like. I guess it's going to be really lovely, isn't it, to use this wisdom, but now take the break off a little bit and make it work for you.
Yeah, exactly. And to recognize that actually life is not all about work, to just keep plugging away. Life is also about making sure that, for me, being in tune with nature is really, it feels an important part of my way forwards.
Definitely, yeah, I'm a big advocate for that. You know, I started doing long walks when the pandemic kicked in, and I hadn't really done that.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not much of a
Yes.
walker, and then when I started doing it, I realized actually I need this in my life. This is so powerful. So every weekend now, me and my partner do, a good hour, 2 hours, and it's really been a great addition to my life, which I never probably would have brought in if it wasn't for the space. It's absolutely amazing. So we're going to dive in a little bit about your story and talk a bit about your book and what to expect and how it can help people. But before we do that, just want to let everybody know at home. You kind of just said some bits, but what you're up to at the moment and what your hopes and you know beliefs for the book and all this kind of thing. What are you up to?
Well, I feel like the book is my legacy book, and I wrote it after my daughter Melissa took her own life. I mean, that's trauma for you. And at the time it happened, I was running my group, and I just walked out of a graveyard, interestingly, when her mother rang me and said Melissa's not with us anymore, and I thought that meant she wasn't staying with them anymore. And then I realised that she was saying that Melissa had actually taken her life. And I went back into my group, which was the end of a 1 year psychotherapy group. So it was the final 4 day retreat. And one of the guys in the group was is a therapist. And I said, David, this has just happened. I've just heard. Can you take over this afternoon? And he set up a grief circle. And I was numb at the time. I was sort of unbelieving of what had gone down for me. But what he did in this grief circle, he said, those of you who've lost a parent, step forward. And a lot of people step forwards. Then they step back again. Those of you who've lost a sibling, step forward. 2 or 3 step forward. Those of you who've lost a good friend, step forward. Again, 2 or 3 step forward. Those of you who lost a child. And I was the only one. And then the grief started to work in me.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Do you feel that the group setting allowed to facilitate you to step into the grieving process?
Absolutely. I'd been working with that group for a year, and they're used to me holding the space, not taking the space. But luckily, my friend David Confino, who's a very, very able psychotherapist, was a part of that group, and he was very able to hold the space for that afternoon. There was another day and a half after that, which I went back into the holding frame. But the group were incredibly supportive. They were happy to give to me. In fact, it was like there was such a sort of warmth that came from the group. I was almost like I couldn't quite bear to be given to in that way, but they did give to me, and it sort of bolstered me before I made my way home at the end of the session.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, so many of us, when I go through the grieving process, there's this element of dissociation of kind of get away from me, isn't there? Like, don't go near me. And it's
Yes,
interesting because the one thing we probably do need is that supportive held space. So we can process and, shed the tears we need to share or shake or whatever it is we need to process. But
exactly. And I went through a whole bunch of things that were sort of supporting me dealing with my grief. And I've done a lot of work in the many years that I've been a psychotherapist. I've done my own work, I've done my own trainings, I've been in other people's work, other people's trainings. And I recognized that I needed to actually find my way through this. I joined a group that the Samaritans were running, which was for people bereaved by suicide. And there were 8 people in that group, which ran for 6 weeks. And it was very powerful for me to be a member of a group and to actually hear other people's stories. And it helped open mine. I went to see a therapist who a friend of mine had recommended, but I couldn't get anywhere near the grief then. And it took me months. It took me probably about 6 months to really access the grief. And I went to a playback theatre performance, which is a sort of it's a routine where people, which Melissa has been part of, where people play out the audience's stories, and people shared their experiences of Melissa, of my daughter, and it was so moving and so deep, and I found myself sobbing at that place. And that was where the grief, it's almost like we get protected from the grief for a while because it's so intense. I mean, one of the women who was in the suicide support group had said that for 9 months she was sobbing on the floor every day, couldn't move, couldn't work. I somehow managed to hold it together. Not that that's necessarily a good thing, but I held it together. And then after a while, when I'd got, it's almost like when I got in tune enough, I let go. And then what's happened since then is I realised that this whole process has educated me. And I've had to take a look at what are the resources that I've got that I've been drawing on. And then I got the idea of writing a book, which was inspired by Melissa's suicide. And the book is called Slay Your Dragons with Compassion. And it's Melissa's story. It's not a grief memoir. It's the story of Melissa's death and what the impact it had on me. And 10 different practices which I've been using. I realized I thought I'd been writing these practices for other people. And of course I have. But really, I'd been writing my own it's almost my instruction manual for myself in what to do to stay stable in these times. So that's what this book started to be. And then I sent it out to people who'd spoken at alternatives, and I had a fantastic response. Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, immediately responded saying it was a transformational book. Eckhart Tolle responded. I've got him on the front cover saying that the book was invaluable and needed to be read. And Jack Cornfield, the Buddhist meditation teacher, also said this is a humane book. And I feel like I've written something that is my legacy. And my daughter Alexandra, my other daughter, she said to me, Dad, she said, you're such a big head, because actually the bottom line in this is, she said, people don't write legacies till they're dead. They don't have legacies till they're dead. But this isn't about dying. This is about facing death, learning from it and coming through it, and then helping to educate myself and others in the process of dealing with trauma and grief.
Well, I'm even more looking forward to reading through what you've created there, because, like you said, it's we all have a voice, and we don't realize how powerful our voices can be if we're willing to share. And I just want to touch back on something that you mentioned about the grieving process and how we're wired to survive, aren't we? We're wired to stay safe, so we're not. When from a trauma perspective, trauma is an overwhelm of the system. And I can only imagine what grief of that level would do to overwhelm the system. And your body would probably effectively shut down, and who knows what could happen. And and they often say, it takes time to grieve. But I think it's more about when the body is ready to process and hold that level of pain. And many of us will disassociate, be high functioning, and carry on with work. But it's a holding of that, your window of tolerance. How much of that pain can you hold before it overwhelms your system and then you disassociate again? What we talk about a lot on this show about trauma is exactly kind of what you're talking about then, but this is a very finite, very in that moment overwhelming situation, which who knows what advice is for that. There isn't any advice, is there, really, to receive that information?
I think we have to find our own template actually for dealing with this. There isn't one size fits all. There isn't a book you can read that will tell you what to do, but you can get guidance along the way. One of the chapters in my book is called Creating a Sangha, and a Sangha is a Buddhist term for a community of like-minded others. They're people who keep you on your path. And actually, for me, what was very important was drawing on the relationships I'd established over the years. And what you find when you're in deep grief, or what I found in deep grief, was that you can see who can handle being with you and who can't. And then you realize you just want to hang out, or I just wanted to hang out with the people who were able to take me as I am. It didn't mean I needed to talk about Melissa all the time. It meant she needed to be present with me, and I didn't want to have to hide and save their vulnerable feelings from having to deal with a bereaved father, but that they could be present with me. And that's another of the chapters in the book, is about practicing the art of presence, which I think is why Eckhart Tolle liked the book.
Thank you. It comes down to a lot of, the being seen, heard, understood, accepted, and held in any given moment, like you said, and surround yourself with those people that do all of the things I've just listed, is where you can begin
Yes.
I don't even know what the word is to come out the other side of that, because you're not trying to forget. It's not about healing. It's kind of how to integrate that person's memories in a way that means that you're functional on a day-to-day basis and can thrive again. But it's not about ending anything, is it? It's not about closing anything off. And I haven't lost anybody that close to me, so it's hard for me to articulate this. I need you to help me, I guess, articulate what this looks like, especially with psychotherapy background.
Interestingly, what you said about integrating, a lot of people want to get rid of or to get through situations. And actually, something like this, I don't want to get through it. I want to integrate it and let it strip me. And Michael Mead had this wonderful quote that I've used in my book as well, which is, in order to become who we truly are, not only does the heart have to break, it has to break many times. And I noticed subsequently, after Melissa's death, that when I was working as a psychotherapist, I felt that much more empowered to go with people into their deepest trauma because I'd been there and I shared it. So there was something profound for me about really allowing myself to be a channel for, and I'm not talking spiritual channel, I'm just sort of to be able to channel that um, amount of trauma in others and also in myself. And I found that when I gave talks, which I do reasonably often, talking about Melissa was a very profound thing, and also choosing not to choosing to talk about her, but not to let stop myself feeling. So if I talk about her, then and I find myself in tears, that's part of my talk. And for me, that was profound. And I found that at my father's funeral in 2011, which Melissa died in 2014. But at my father's funeral, when I gave the eulogy at his funeral, I found myself crying, and I didn't stop myself. And it took me right back to when Melissa was born. She's been one of my great educations anyway. So when Melissa was born, we had this whole birth planned with the sort of healers and acupuncturists and therapists, and this lovely music playing and incense and all this beautiful stuff. And suddenly there was a problem, and Melissa's mother got rushed into hospital for a cesarean operation, and they didn't know whether the baby would survive. And I'm standing there praying. And then when the baby's born, when Melissa was born, the nurse handed her to me. And I took Melissa in my arms, and I suddenly flooded with tears. But actually, I felt embarrassed in front of strangers, allowing my tears to be seen. And I made a vow to myself that as a therapist, as someone who's consciously working on himself, I will not stop my flow of tears. I think you'll find that the people who are most humane in this world are people who are in touch with their tears. It's the people who are sort of have closed down that can do terrible things to other people or to animals.
Yeah, I think it's that level of suppression, isn't it? You're talking about where it's so easy to start suppressing that I shouldn't, you know, burst into tears in the workplace because I don't want to make everyone feel uncomfortable with whatever I'm going through. It's that suppression that doesn't allow us to sit with our pain. And we're talking about suffering, so much of suffering is resistance of pain. So it starts with pain and then suffering there follows. I don't know if that's true. It's just what I keep picking up on these shows and these episodes that I speak to people on.
I think there's some truth in that, but interestingly, about 5 days or 6 days after Melissa died, I had a pre-existing workshop for Guildford District Council, which was a group I'd been working with over about 3 years, and it was team building and all sorts of stuff like that. And I didn't want to cancel that. That I thought that's the last gig I'll do, and then I'm going to stop. But it's already booked in, everything's arranged. I'll go and do it. And of course, I'm not going to go and burst into tears in front of them. I'm not going to tell them what's happened. But I went there and I ran one of the worst workshops I've ever run because actually I wasn't able to center myself. I wasn't able to find my radar, which is again is one of the chapters of my book is finding your radar. I wasn't able to tune in. So um, it would have been far better if I'd cancelled the workshop. And I know that the leader of the group was not wildly impressed. She wasn't. I mean, I didn't blow it, but I didn't fly, and she was used to me flying when I was running these things.
Well, there's no prime example, like you said, going into that space, trying to, not be authentic, not be congruent with whatever's going on. And it's very hard to bond with
Exactly.
people and get a sense
Yes.
of somebody who somebody is without that. I found that, vulnerability is the best bonding agent ever because that person, if they really want to be or can tolerate you being vulnerable, that's the thing, isn't it? It's whether they can tolerate you being like that. But the strongest relationships I've made, especially with men through this journey, are all of those men who are up for telling me exactly what's going on in that moment and being well up for telling me that they feel like absolute shit and they're willing to tell me that. And I'm like, I've got you, man. I've got you. If that's bonding right there, it's similar for that.
And that's the thing we can do as men. It's almost like we feel about 30 years behind women, that actually we've got a lot of catching up to do to actually be able to be emotionally congruent with each other. And actually, that's for me, that's a practice. Can we really show ourselves, not show our best selves or what we consider to be our most presentable selves, but can we show ourselves as we truly are? Now, you mentioned before about crying in the workplace. I wouldn't want to do that, but I would want to do it if I'm giving a lecture, and I would want to do it if I'm hanging out with friends. I would want to do it in lots of other scenarios. And so there are some places where I would stop myself from being in touch with my feelings because they wouldn't fit. And I would choose where to do that. But actually, what I really want for myself and for others is to have environments around me which fit me, which are able to do that. Now, I've been running men's groups for 30 years. So I was part of a men's group. I was also running a men's group. And I was also part of a triad of three men who were regularly meeting to sort of look at their life and their issues. And I was able to bring myself to all of those environments and be met where I was. The other interesting thing is that about 2 years before Melissa died, I'd started a death group, which was a group of people who were exploring their attitudes towards death and dying. And so, again, I was the facilitator of that group, but I went to that group, and one of the other people offered to take over to the running of it for that evening. I said, no, I want to run it. And I was able to share quite deeply what was going on for me, which was welcomed. And that's the thing, we have to find the environments that will welcome us. You have to choose your environments. So you don't walk into a pub where everyone's drunk and go, hey, I've just lost my daughter. You know, like, oh, yeah, okay, man, you know, whatever it is that might be. We've got to find and create environments where we can truly be held.
Thank you. That's such good advice. You know, people. I was literally talked to my partner about this yesterday about how we want the tribe that we're in to change somehow or be the thing that we need to get our needs met, rather than seeing actually there's a bigger community. There's more options than that. You know, get out there and find a tribe rather than trying to pigeonhole the one that you've got. And I think if you can have different tribes for different things, you know, I love having my mates and my new job where we just talk about football and we're doing our stuff, stacking shelves on the night shift, and we're just having a great laugh. I need those guys. I need those guys to have a great time. But I also need my emotionally attuned guys from these projects that I can open up to. And I feel a very rich life by having all of those kinds of people, which is kind of what you're alluding to there, aren't you?
Yeah, we need that.
If you don't mind me asking, there's one question that I'd be really intrigued to find out because I've asked a few people like this before. So from the aspect of losing a child of yours, from a professional standpoint, how did the impact of Melissa's death affect you on a psychotherapist level? How did that? Did you have doubts about yourself within your work, or did you keep that as a separate part of your existence? Should we say?
I had doubts about myself and everything. I actually sort of thought, what is this all about anymore? And what I found was that as a psychotherapist, as long as I'm congruent, it's fine. I wouldn't want to be working with someone who didn't know what had happened to me, for example. I wouldn't want to be hiding that at a sort of a visceral level. But it doesn't mean I need to start filling the psychotherapy session with my experience. It means I've got to have my cards on the table as well. And so I found that I was sharing this with people who were working with me, all of whom responded very, very well. No one said, I don't want to hear about you. I didn't go into detail. So, but what I found was that as a psychotherapist, it was a place where I was able to practice presence. And Melissa's death brought me more present. It actually started to have an impact and change me. So I'm now 5.5 years on from when she died. And I will never get over it, and I don't want to get over it. But I have come to a place of some peace and some understanding. And writing the book, I remember at one point I was working with this chap called Ben Crabe who was helping me get the book down. And I remember at one stage saying to Ben, do you know, if no one ever read this book, if it never got published, I already had a publishing deal, but I said if it never got published, it would still be worthwhile for me. I would still be doing something I needed to do to exorcise that. And what I realize is that when we've had grief or trauma, what we need is our creative part that reflects on the grief and trauma. For me, it was writing and speaking. Those were my creative energies. I was talking to someone else even today who was talking about having drawn his partner's cousin committed suicide, and he drew her portrait, the girl who'd committed suicide, and he said he felt a sense of peace come over him as he did this. So we have to start to practice using our creativity to find our ways into these things.
Certainly, and it's like you said, sometimes you can't voice or express what the pain feels like, what the suffering feels like. So there has to be another processing pathway, like you're talking about, a creative outlet. I wrote poetry as a, I had I had abuse as a child, with child minors, and then into school, horrendous bullying. So I wrote 100 poems when I was a teenager as a way to express my sense of the
Fantastic.
world, and they're beautiful to read back now. And for me, just to read back, I've never got them published, but what I'm now doing is turning them into videos, put them out on YouTube as mini short films. Hopefully they can, help somebody else. But it wasn't about that. Like you said, you're doing it as a way of your process. And the most important thing,
Have you got one of them with you now, Owen?
not near me. On a couple of episodes ago, me and a poet read out a lot of our stuff on a podcast episode.
Oh,
It was
good.
very
Okay,
fun.
good. So I was going to say that would be quite cathartic for you to be able to read that
Yeah,
poetry
yeah, totally. I
with an
because
audience.
I've been reading it out for these videos, but me and my friend Zach, and I've met two other guys who also write and are very creative. We're going to do four of us are going to do a big group podcast, and we're going to do some slam poetry and read our work out. And some of Zach's work just blew my mind. It is amazingly dark but beautiful, you know. And I think a lot of people will have probably some shifts just reading it. They might have an emotional shift, maybe start to cry. All good ways to express things outwardly, which is amazing.
Because it comes from an authentic place. What I found is that the people whose work I respect, the artists, writers, musicians, have often gone through their own suffering, which has helped birth what it is that they're capable of doing. So I think that stuff feels so much more profound. I was just reading today about Peter Green from Fleetwood Mac, who died recently, a few days ago. Um, and he wrote the song "Man of the World," which was one of their big hits. And apparently, it was one of his colleagues had said, his fellow musicians had said, this was Peter's cry for help. And it's a beautiful song because it comes from his own suffering. And again, one of my great heroes in terms of being a writer is Hermann Hesse. And his work, I, I hadn't realized until I read his life story, there was lots of suffering that he went through that actually helped him create the powerful narratives that he managed to get down.
It's I'm sure a lot of people have the same situation that you just said there. When you have a love for, say, a certain couple of songs or a certain artist, but then you find out a little bit more about their story, it instantly makes those songs become even more amazing because you can see the emotional intent behind it. Then you can really connect to the human being behind those words. And it's such an accessible way to hear somebody else's emotion through the medium of sound, words, rhythm, beat. It's just a really nice way, isn't it, to absorb other people's message.
It is. One of my heroes is Leonard Cohen, and his words are so profound. They break my heart when I listen to them sometimes. The words like, every heart to love shall come, but like a refugee. I mean, he's been somewhere to be able to pluck out words like that. Or there is a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in.
Wow, so powerful, so powerful. I feel like I need to get you on this poetry episode as well. Beautiful way of words.
Yeah.
It's going to be amazing. So, what I'm intrigued about with the build up to you writing this book. So from the process of getting the news and your journey through integrating, as we're going to call it, what had happened. What was the process of getting you there to your book, and why did you decide to go down the route of ways to use this to help you on your journey, help the reader on their journey? How did you decide on that format from this?
Well, there were three young people that I was mentoring, that I had a sort of a therapeutic relationship with, and we decided to sort of create an empaths group because all of them were highly empathic, highly sensitive, and highly tuned. And we looked at ways we could have of creating some sort of empath's journey. And we looked at all sorts of things. And we looked at the book, and we looked at creating workshops and trainings for people. But what started to speak to me was the book. And one of the guys in this group of four of us, the three of them plus me, had done quite a lot of writing and editing, and we started messing with words and just trying to get something down that would be profound. And it wasn't about Melissa at that stage, it was just about empathy. And after a while, I realized that we were actually very well in tune. And so I said to him, I've got a feeling that I need to write about Melissa in this, and I need to write about the therapeutic journey that I've been on for the last 30 years, and to do some case studies that will illustrate some of the points I'm trying to make. So we started playing with that for about a year and a half. Then I went to Watkins, the publishers, and they said, "Yeah, we're interested in the book." So once we got a deal on the book, that was when it was like, bang, okay, now got to start working on this and actually really setting this down. So it was a process of a couple of years. But once I got on track and I realised what I wanted to write, which was what are the practices that keep us sane when we've gone through trauma, we're in suffering? What are the practices we can do to armour ourselves, but not armour like thick iron, armour like gossamer. So just to keep ourselves safe, but to keep ourselves resourced. And bit by bit, the book just evolved. And I've written 2 books before this, which were fine. They were nothing special. They were good enough. And what I found is the book started to write itself. And I remember reading Taylor Caldwell years ago, a book called Dialogues with the Devil. And Taylor Caldwell spoke about having started the book using her mind, her intellect, to think, what would it be like to dialogue with the devil? And then she said, after a while, when she actually started to get this stuff down, she realised stuff was coming through her that she couldn't consciously attribute to any intellectual process. But she was writing something, and I found that with this book, that actually it was the easiest book. My first book took 4 years to write, but this book took, once we got on the track, took 10 months. And it's not a sort of 10 months because I rushed it out and wrote a load of rubbish. It took 10 months because it was dying to be born. And my book before this was 2004, and I've wanted to write a book ever since. Nothing's been there for me, but this book asked to be born, and actually it's I'm pleased with what's come through. I do feel like I've captured some of the essence of what I need to keep myself resilient, to keep myself feeling like I'm living a life where I have some protection, but I also have connection, and I have practices, because I think the whole world, for all what we need, are practices. It's no point you can have an amazing revelation, and people will take drugs or alcohol or other things to get revelations. But for me, it's about practice. So if you, for example, if you're looking at kindness as a practice, the Dalai Lama said, "My religion is kindness." If you're kind once, that's great. But if on a daily basis you're looking for ways to exhibit kindness, you start to strengthen that muscle, and then the kindness starts to become a part of you. And what I see is that meditation daily, that meditation practice starts to become a part of me. So I try to start every day with meditation. Just simple, doesn't have to be hours and hours, doesn't have to be chanting on, but it's just time for silence to keep the practice of resilience alive in me.
Thank you. So it's so huge. I literally saw a quote today about the power of daily practice, and you have the sessions with either therapist or teacher, whoever you're working with. If they resource you with tools that you can use, you can integrate what happened even more so. You can really start to change your biology, your neuroplasticity, and things start to shift and change through daily practice. And sometimes the hardest part is keeping it going, as we know, especially things like meditation. But my last guest talked about one of the best things you can do is to apply warmth to your body. So, having a hot water bottle on your belly, helping your body temperature be at a higher level to deal with inflammation and all this kind of stuff, which I thought was very powerful. And like you're saying, these daily practices really start to change, not change who you are, because I think more about reconnecting than becoming anything. You're just reconnecting, maybe clearing out some space to allow other things in.
I think what we're doing is we're stripping away some of the dross that gets in the way of us being who we are. At essence, each of us is a magnificent human being. But actually, we get affected by life, and life will do what it does to us. And when that happens, then um, we lose contact with the deepest part of ourselves, and we can feel like our lives become meaningless. And for me, what's important is to make our lives meaningful. Um, there's a lovely quote by George Bernard Shaw about the meaning of life that I just think is so profound. I'd love to. Can I read you that quote?
Yes, please. We have a good quote on the show.
This is the true joy in life, being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one. Being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances. Complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it what I can. It is a sort of splendid torch which I have got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations.
Wow, that is amazing, and I need you to send that to me straight away, so so I
Yeah,
can
I'll
so
do
I can do an
that.
Instagram post about that because that sounds amazing. And it kind of yeah, the it's the expansiveness of everything, really, isn't it? You forget how expansive everything is because you get so stuck in our little world, our little bubble of drama and
Exactly,
suffering. And
yes.
my partner is such an inspiration to me because we'll go for a walk and without fail, every week she'll say, "Oh my God, look how beautiful that view is," or "How beautiful is that flower?" Or "How beautiful is it, this city? How blessed are we to be in this city?" And I just want to be more like her every day because that is one way to look at the world, isn't it? No matter how shit things get, you can say, but that's beautiful. And it's not easy because negativity bias likes to come along and go, "Hey, how are you? By the way, everything's shit," because that's what your brain wants you to think to keep you safe. Whereas probably where our evolution has gone a bit too far and we're probably too clever for our own goods now and not keeping it.
Well, I think we have to access the essence of who we are. We have to access our hearts, and actually, that's a lifetime's journey. We're not going anywhere. We've arrived somewhere. We don't know where we've come from. At some point, we'll die, and we don't know where we're going next. But while we're here, we have to access and make our lives feel like it's got purpose. And if our lives have got purpose, then we feel like every day is a blessing, rather than it's another day to slog through, to complain about, feeling this and have arguments with that. Actually, it's an opportunity to practice being our best selves.
Yeah, you're spot on. The purpose thing is huge. This is why you do what you do, why I do this. I can't imagine a life without a project that actually has impact. This is the one I'm doing at the moment. So I totally get that. Purpose is huge.
Well, I love that you're doing this, Owen, because it actually feels quite powerful that that this is what you're doing with your life. So,
Oh,
um,
totally, totally. And I'm happy to do any old job like I'm doing right now in the background because this is my passion. I'm happy to do the other job. I'm very grateful for the money. But this is what I can't exactly monetize this in a secure way. But that's cool. It's my purpose. So it doesn't really matter.
we don't need to monetize everything. One of the things I wrote about in one of my earlier books was I used to get the 274 bus to work, and there was a bus conductor on this bus who was like a sort of laughing little old man. And when little old ladies came on the bus, he would joke with them and laugh with them. And it felt like his purpose was to make everyone feel good. And the atmosphere in the bus used to be electric. And I used to love catching his bus because actually his purpose was being lived. It wasn't that he was monetizing it, but actually he was living his sense of making people feel good. So our purpose doesn't have to be a magnificent one, but our purpose has to be something that makes us feel like this is what I was born to do. This is a practice that's good for me and good for the world.
Totally. And I think those purposes you're talking about are revealed to us when we create that space. When you create space, you then discover these things. The problem is people say, "Oh, I don't think I really have one." But it's probably because they're living a life which is too full and they're not connecting enough to their body and to what's going on. And I think when you do that, it could be big, small, however you want to see it. But actually, if your purpose is having an impact on one person, it's huge. You smile at someone in the street, you give them some eye contact. I know 100% if I go out and give someone a smile, I can tell instantly on on a nervous system level that they loved it. They love the fact that someone actually noticed them. And people don't realize that how that could change the course of their journey. If they say they're about to go and have a therapy session and you did that, it opened up the door to them to know they can connect to a stranger.
Exactly. We've sown a seed of love instead of sown a seed of hatred. I was talking to this chap the other day who's a client, and he'd had quite a high flying job, and then lost his job, and then his wife was out working, and he was looking after the children, and he was really questioning himself whether he was doing anything of value, But actually, what I was able to reflect to him and what we were able to work with was how amazing it was that he was keeping these children sort of occupied. He was lighting them up. He was educating them. He was actually spending a lot of his time making sure that his children were happy. I said that's a really valid purpose.
Yeah, it's huge. Parents forget that being a parent
Yes,
alone
yes,
is
exactly.
massive. Especially single parents have unbelievable respect for them. They don't have much time left, but the time that they do have, not only are they being a parent, they've also got the opportunity to do a few other things. But people, it's all stories as well, isn't it? We get stuck in stories and belief systems like we're not good enough. But that's another episode. That's not for today. So my question for you is, can you tell me why you chose to call it Slay Your Dragons with Compassion?
Well, that's a really good question because I've had to fight for that title. In my groups, I've been running ongoing groups for 30 years odd. I came across this line in a song by a band called Gentlemen Without Weapons called Transmissions. And one of the lines in the song said, "Slay your dragons with compassion." And that line had stuck in my head, and I started teaching it in groups. We're going to have to sometimes say difficult things to people. But if we say difficult things to people without making them into rubbish, that actually we can say it while keeping our hearts open, we're slaying our dragon with compassion. If we're able to face ourselves and really take a look at the parts inside ourselves that we don't like, without necessarily trashing that, we can start to really, and not avoiding it either, we start to slay our dragons with compassion. So I've used that terminology for years and years and years. And when it came to the book, I just thought, this is what I want to call it. And at one stage, my editor came to me and he said, look, he said, I want to talk to you about the title. He said, the team here are not sure that it's the right title. And he said this very beautifully. He said, I don't suppose that's up for grabs. And he gave me enough of a thing to say, no, it's not. And actually, that title feels like it's unique. It's mine. I mean, yes, I heard it in a song originally, but actually, I've been using that practice in my work and in myself for more than 10, 15 years. So for me, the book had to have that title. And I had all sorts of people say, oh, you can't call it that. Slaying dragons feels wrong, but actually it felt right to me, and it still does. It feels more right.
I totally get your logic for using it, and I know that people are like, oh, but the initial part of that sentence seems a little bit, little bit fight and flight, a little bit aggressive or whatever. But they're not
That's the thing,
seeing the
aggressive, yeah.
expansiveness of the whole sentence or what it actually means. But that's the beauty of a good title, I think, because it makes people go, what? So that's what you're looking for, right? People say to me, what the hell does man cove well-being mean? Why is it not man cave?
Yes,
But then when I
exactly.
tell them what cove means, they're like, that's amazing. Okay, that's cool. I want them to ask me that question because I've just hooked them in by them into my energy field, and then they see my passion for the title. Therefore, they're sold on the passion. So I think it's clever.
And that's, by the way, you've just named something really essential, Owen, which is that actually when we bring our passion to things, interesting, the word compassion means with passion. When we bring our passion to things, that's when we can really achieve. That's when we can really make things happen. If you're passionate about Man Cove, it's your thing. So actually, you will make it happen at whatever level it can, but you're committed to it. And I can feel it. When you interview me, I can feel the profundity of the journey that you're undertaking through this medium that you're using.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I feel the same way about most of the guests that I interview who are also very authentically and congruently attached and connected to what they're doing. And that's why I love to be in those spaces with those people, because they're totally vibrating on my vibe, which is why when I get 10 of us together on one call, we have special episodes. They're so mind-blowing because everybody is on the same pathway. But no, I'm a big advocate for your title, so that's absolutely fine. And we're calling the episode that. This episode is called that even. So
Hooray!
even
Fantastic.
better for that. So, what do you feel are the key takeaways from your experience of loss and trauma? What has been like the message from Melissa's death and your experience of that?
Okay, so the first would be to embrace suffering. Actually, suffering is not a terrible thing, it's part of our human experience. And if we run away from suffering or medicate suffering or addictively deal with suffering, it will still stay with us. And I remember Elizabeth Kubler-Ross saying that real suffering, when you've had a genuine major loss in your life, and this is a very useful little template actually, then it's going to take you about 2 years to get to some place on the other side of it. 6 months of intensity and 18 months of recovery. And then, of course, the journey goes on as well. But if we don't honor that period of time in mourning and grieving for our losses, we tend to become shallower, or we tend to lack the possibility of accessing the depths. So that would be one of the takeaways. Another one is embracing death, that actually we are all going to die. That is part of the human experience. And I'm very interested in the whole process of dying, that how we treat dying, how it's tucked away out of sight of most people, that they never see a dead body. And actually, I think if we can make dying a part of our ethos, that we are face to face with death and dying, then when we stop running away from it. Another takeaway would be uh, active listening, deep listening. So if we're really learning to witness each other. So I was working with a client this morning who was talking about his relationship with his girlfriend, and she was going through some traumatic happening, and he was trying to fix it for her. And I was saying, actually, what she really will appreciate is to really be able to be with her in it, to really be able to listen to her. So there's something about, as men, we're designed to fix things, and actually, it's a real practice not to fix, but to be with, to stay present with. Other takeaways would be about using relationships to educate us. So one of my chapters is called "Let Your Relationships Educate You." And relationships, are they an extraordinary place? Because I've used this line: "Falling in love is the temporary lifting of critical faculties." Any fool can fall in love. You know, we can all go, "Oh, I've met this most wonderful person." And then after a while, the honeymoon ends, and you're dealing with another person and all their neuroses, plus you and all your neuroses. And can you get through that? But actually, if we can learn to practice the art of loving in our relationships, that's another of the ways in which we can educate ourselves. We can build resilience and resources through using the relationships as a place to practice honesty, as a place to practice integrity, as a place to live from our truth. There's some of the takeaways that are in there.
Oh, some amazing takeaways right there. And I just wanted to touch on something you said there about kind of people seem to think there's things that are wrong with behaviors or things that are uncomfortable. And I like to think about it from children. So my 4-year old, we explained to him, we like literally today, how are you feeling in your body? We say to him, how are you feeling in your body now? We get him to name it. We get him to tell us what's going on. He'll say, oh, I'm a bit angry because you said I couldn't do this. He never would have told us that if we didn't ask him to name what was going on in his body. So he's able, and we're able to go, oh, yeah, we understand why you were angry, but we just wanted to keep you safe. And then he's like, okay, so we can see it's come from a place of love. So this child hopefully should grow up to be very embodied and very aware. If every parent did that, I'm sure we'd have a totally different world on our hands. But it's the same thing for adults. Can you come into your body, sense it, name it, and know that it's okay to be angry and to be with that anger as long as, it's been done safely and you're not obviously injuring someone. But as soon as you start suppressing anger, God knows what that's going to do to your biology.
Well, the most dangerous people are the suppressed people. So the people who are really furious but are leaking it in every pore of their body. They're the people that you'd want to stay well clear of, because something in them is desperately sort of like lashing out. Of course, it comes from fear and pain, but at the time where it's happening, if that anger is leaked, it's like acid eroding everything in its path. Whereas clean anger, about really, if you're like your 4-year-old said, it's like, actually, I'm a bit angry, and actually what happened there is he was able to express it, you were able to respond to it, and he was able to get through it without having to suppress it.
Yeah, totally. And what I tend to do with him is what I've learned a bit from Peter Levine's books is that we have something. I share this with you. It's the first time I've ever shared this on the podcast. I share it with you today, Malcolm, which is um, we call it supercharge boosters, right? So if I know he's got a lot of pent up sympathetic energy from, tantrum and maybe a bit of anger, there's loads of love. We're hugging constantly. We've got so much love, me and him. And he's my stepson. So we have this unconditional, gorgeous bond where we just are there for each other. But I call it supercharge boosters. So what he'll do is he'll put his head into my shoulder and then I'll push towards him. He pushes towards me. And we both keep saying supercharge boosters with very nice voices. And we both push towards each other. So he can really push against me and, channel that energy out of his body through pushing. And honestly, like, I just see the shifts in him after we've done that. He can just then go off, be joyful and play. And this supercharged boosters is a metaphor for Pete Levine's, pushing through slow movements and all that kind of stuff. And I just want to share that with you because I'm trying to show him that he can process these feelings in a safe way with safe people, safe environments.
And Owen, that's beautiful, and you want to educate other people, other parents, because actually if we can bring up the next generation to be conscious, to be wise, to be in touch with their feelings, to be compassionate, to be kind. If we can do all those things, then we can start to change the world. The world will not change with revolution. It never has. There have been lots of revolutions. But evolution is a different story. And I'm part of a team called Compassionate Mental Health. And in fact, the person who ran Compassionate Mental Health, this is another thing that happened to me after Melissa died. I was approached by a woman called Bridget Bowen, who said to me, I'm organising these conferences on compassionate mental health, and I hear you're a facilitator. Would you come along and run some workshops and be part of the opening, to hold the group at the beginning? And I let her know about Melissa, which she didn't know about. She said, "Oh my God," she said, "that is so perfect." So I start every conference with telling Melissa's story. And there's something for me about that's really about letting that in and letting these places be active inside me. So what you've just described with your son is that you found a way of operating that's healthy and warm. And when people release their stories, one of the workshops I run in this compassionate mental health conference is called Telling Our Stories. When people tell their stories and they get heard, they're no longer carrying it as a mark of shame. And often they come from shameful places.
Totally. And I mean, shame is a whole other ball game, isn't it? That is yet again another episode. But shame plays a huge part in a lot of this. It's shameful to feel those things. I mean, as soon as you're in a space of shame, then you know talk about beliefs and stories that will start to fly into your mind, and it can massively affect us. And relieving ourselves from that shame and becoming vulnerable once again is probably one of the most healing things that we can do for ourselves. But again, like we always say, everything we're talking about needs to be done with safety. Without safety, it's potentially re-traumatizing, re-triggering. So
It's true. That's
you
right.
know,
Even taking, I used to, as a therapist, I used to take people into cathartic beating cushions. And I remember the first time when I was in a therapy training group, um, there was this woman doing this work on her mother and screaming and shrieking. And I was so impressed. But 2 years later, at the end of the group, she was still doing the same stuff, just re-traumatizing herself again and again. So there's something about doing something, having it heard, and moving on as well, being willing to let go of some of the trauma and pain that we can hold on to. It's almost delicious to hold on to that trauma and pain.
I think on some weird level, there's a level of safety within the pain, within the trauma. The trauma is familiar. I have activities and behaviors that make me feel safe because of the trauma. I don't, if I lose those behaviors, I become traumatized again. So there's something very safe about being stuck in the vortex of what we're going through, and stepping out of that can be very uncomfortable. Which is why they talk about pendulation so much. You step out for a little bit, you dip your toes in, you step back into your safe space, out, in, out, in. And that's how I reconnected with my body. I was very unsafe in my body from my abuse as a kid. I didn't feel anywhere safe. My hands, feet, everything was burning or numb or heavy. And as I started to find safe little spots and grow on those through daily practice, I'm able to feel more embodied. And it took time. It took time, like you said. It takes time, and I know that sucks, but it is part of the process. And if you can have a X amount of minutes of safety per day, your biology and things can start to shift, and you see the world differently. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here about my excitement.
No, you've just named something very important. You've named something very important, which is actually it takes time and it takes practice. This is how we make changes. We don't make changes because we decide one day, oh, on a New Year's resolution, I'm going to be kind. It's not going to work like that. Your New Year's resolution might be, I'm going to practice kindness every day. And that might be the way it works. But you've just talked about coming through a situation where your whole body was reflecting the abuse that you'd suffered, and you had to find your way through it, or alternatively, and this is what often happens to people, or break down. And actually, you did find your way through it, and this has led you to doing I would say it would led you to doing the work you've done. And some of the work that you're doing will be based on the fact that you've come through something. And oh yeah, I was going to say at this conference, there's a guy called Russell Razak who's a psychiatrist who lectures at these conferences on compassionate mental health. And he came up with this statement. It's not his own, but it really struck with me, which was the arc of the universe is long, but ultimately it bends towards justice. So we can see all the wickedness around us in the world, and we can see all the pain and all the sort of the suffering that's around us. But ultimately, we're on an evolutionary path towards wholeness and holiness. And it's up to each of us to find that path in ourselves. And it's up to each of us to contribute to helping that path be part of society as well.
Certainly, it's very, very powerful, and be the change you want to see in the world, and all the other cheesy lines that come
Exactly.
along. But
No,
you know,
but it's
yeah.
cheesy because it's real. It sounds like a cliche, but actually, if you're really practicing that, that's a profound truth.
Certainly, any workplace I go into, I try and be that guy that people go, wow, like he just has such a great energy, and I've just started a new job 2 weeks ago, so I'm starting to form bonds and friendships now through just walking in there with love, and I can't wait to get to know everybody, and I'm really accepting of everybody, seeing past politic talks in the workplace, seeing past all that, and just looking forward to getting to know the human beings, and it's working. People are really warming to me, so I hope more people can think of life that way. So, Malcolm, before we go, what can people expect from this book? This is your last chance to give it a good old plug.
Right. Well, what they can expect is to read. First of all, is to read an authentic story, or many authentic stories. There'll be some beautiful stories in there. Really touching stories of people finding their way through therapeutically, finding their way through. There are practices in the book, so each chapter ends with a practice where we're working with the practice. They're not enormous, but if, for example, you've never meditated and you spend 5 minutes a day meditating for a month, you'll notice the difference. Um, they can expect to be touched. Hopefully, the book will touch their hearts and actually penetrate them to some degree to where their true essence is. I think they can expect to be inspired to make changes in their lives so that their lives become richer and their lives become fuller. And I don't believe in right and wrong. I believe in skillful and unskillful. And I think the practice is to try and find, and this is what the book is all about, is helping people to upskill themselves in various ways.
Amazing. I like that saying, by the way. Thank you. I hope the audience take that, skillful, unskillful. I like that. There's growth opportunity, there's space to develop, which is a lot more hopeful, isn't it, than good and bad or rubbish or.
Yeah, rather than you're rubbish or you're fantastic. We have both these modules. Where we think someone's fantastic, they're not. They're a human being. Or we think someone's rubbish, and again, they're not. They're a human being. With the good and the bad in both
Yeah,
cases.
and there's always scope to get that 1% better in inverted commas and any of that. It's for kids learning, they're learning tennis for the first time. They're going to perceive themselves as rubbish in inverted commas, but every time they play, they hit a little bit better, and that's life, in a nutshell. You carve it out that way.
I'll bet you your stepson doesn't see himself as rubbish because you're actually giving him some ground that's helping him support him.
Yeah, he knows was as oyster because we're trying to show him that obviously there's realism along the way in the parenting world, obviously, but if he's probably more health conscious than I am. If we're walking down the street and my foot steps onto the road, he says, "Owen, foot." He's the health and safety officer straight off the bat because we've
Fantastic.
instilled that into him. So he's amazing. So I just want to thank you so much for joining today. I've absolutely loved this conversation and also how much you've touched me through this chat.
And me too. It's all about chemistry with people. This is why I love the interviewing process, um, because actually that's when things get to be electric and alive. And so I feel lit up by dialoguing with you. Thank you so much.
Oh, amazing. No, thank you. I'm going to put links to your website and obviously links to Amazon for pre-ordering. So this will be out around that time. So guys and girls, get pre-ordering. This is going to be an amazing book and it's endorsed by some absolute legends. So that's got to mean something. That I was very excited to hear about. So that's brilliant. So we're going to find out what's next for you, Malcolm, in a second. I'm just going to thank my patrons and I'll be back with you in a moment. So I just want to say a huge thank you to all our patrons on Patreon for your support. Your monthly donations really allow me more time to do what I love, and I hope it gives you value. There's a range of benefits for our patrons. So thank you, Mike Morgan, Emerald McLeod, Maggie Palmer, Daniel Billing, Roland Chesters, Hannah Irvin, Karen Goodson, Julie Ferris, Stella Stati, and of course, my co-hosts, Stephen Truelove and Darryl Osborne, two absolutely amazing dudes, just like Malcolm. You can sign up to the Man Cove Wellbeing community at the link in the description of this video, or visit www.patreon.com/MCW. As some of you already are realizing, coaching coves are on the way, and it will be a live stream of kind of live talk shows which men can come along to ask questions, and my panel of amazing coaches will have a laugh and answer your questions. And I'm hoping to create a safe space for all you amazing listeners. I feel like there's somewhere I want you to go after you hear these things, so I look forward to setting that up. So Malcolm, what is, other than the book obviously, I guess what's next for you is this big move to Totnes, right?
Yeah, I think what's next for me is to take more time with myself and be in nature, is to be with friends, is to actually not believe that I have to work every moment of every day. You know, I'm 70 years old now, and actually, it's like it's wonderful that I've hit a different period in my life. I no longer have to fill every moment. I'm actually enjoying. This is part of the lockdown process. I'm actually enjoying hanging out, taking long walks. Yeah, they're good. They're good for me.
Definitely. Well, first off, I cannot believe in a million years that you're 70.
Oh, thank you.
So
It's really kind.
what? That's not possible. So there
Yeah,
you
yeah,
go.
yeah.
You're obviously thriving in more ways than one. So that is amazing.
But it is my
Congratulations.
belief that actually, my belief is that we stay young when we find our purpose, because actually, with our bodies, constantly rising to the challenge of living our lives, rather than we're bored and we can't be bothered, we become sedentary and we watch TV all day long.
I think, like you said earlier, passion and lust for things that we're doing provide us with the energy to make us feel alive. Therefore, we will appear to be younger just because we're thriving and we haven't given up on anything. We know there's still space to grow and develop. And I can be like you when I get there, then yes, please. That'll be awesome. So thank you so much again for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Owen. I've really enjoyed working with you.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much for listening, everybody at home. We'll be back next time for some more wellness chitty chat. As always, I have some mind-blowing, wonderful guests on. I can't even cope with the amazing human beings that I meet. My nervous system's like, help. But I just want to wish you all a wonderful day. Stay safe, support your friends, and take care of that nervous system of yours, because it will certainly take care of you if you look after it. So thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.